They called me an honoree, but the truth was I was just a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. My unexpected triumph was, in fact, designed to be my downfall. The fabric of my dress felt like a lie. It was a deep sapphire blue, the kind of color that's supposed to make you feel confident, regal even. My mom had found it on a clearance rack and spent 2 weeks altering it. Her fingers pricked and sore, just so I could have something beautiful for tonight. "My brilliant girl deserves to shine," she'd said, her voice thick with a pride that always made my stomach twist with a strange mix of gratitude and dread. Gratitude because she was my everything, and dread because I was terrified of letting her down. She couldn't be here tonight, of course. A double shift at the diner was the only way we'd made rent this month. "Take pictures of everything, Sarah," she'd instructed, pressing a 20 into my hand for a cab home. "I want to see your face when you get that award." That was the problem. The award. It felt like a clerical error, a cosmic joke that I was too polite to question. The letter had arrived 2 weeks ago, a thick cream-colored envelope with the school's crest embossed in gold. I was being honored at the annual Academic and Arts Excellence Awards night. For what, it didn't specify, just that my presence was requested in the reserved seating section. I'd read it a dozen times, my finger tracing my own name, Sarah Jenkins, as if it belonged to someone else. I wasn't Jessica Albright, the future valedictorian whose name was practically synonymous with a 4.0 GPA. I wasn't Mark Peterson, the quarterback who had secured a full-ride scholarship before the season even ended. I was just Sarah. I wrote stories in a worn-out notebook, I aced my literature classes, and I kept my head down. People like me didn't get honored. We were the background characters in someone else's triumphant high school movie. The auditorium buzzed with the low hum of self-congratulation. Parents in their Sunday best beamed at their prodigies, the air thick with the scent of hairspray and expensive perfume. I clutched my small borrowed purse and navigated the crowded aisles, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The first 10 rows were cordoned off with velvet ropes, an usher checking names on a clipboard. I mumbled my name and he nodded, waving me through. My breath caught in my throat. This was real. I was really supposed to be here. The seats were assigned. Little white tent cards with names printed in elegant calligraphy sat on each plush red velvet chair. It was a sea of the school's elite. I saw Jessica's name in the front row, of course, right next to Mark's. I saw the names of the debate team champions, the science fair winners, the student council president. I started in the first row and walked slowly, my eyes scanning the pristine white cards, my cheap heels sinking slightly into the thick carpet. Row 1, no Sarah Jenkins. Row 2, nothing. My smile, the one I had pasted on for my mom's sake, began to feel stiff and heavy. By the time I reached the 5th row, a cold knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. This had to be a mistake. Maybe they spelled my name wrong? I scanned again, more desperately this time, searching for anything that looked like Jenkins. Nothing. I was an island of sapphire blue in a sea of confident, seated people who belonged. A few of them were starting to look at me, their expressions ranging from pity to annoyance. I was the girl loitering in the aisle, blocking the view. My face burned, a hot, creeping blush that I knew was turning my skin a blotchy red. I backtracked, my movements growing frantic. Maybe I missed it. Maybe it fell on the floor. I crouched down awkwardly, peering under the seats, my carefully styled hair falling into my face. Nothing but dust bunnies and a discarded program. I stood up, my cheeks flaming. Jessica Albright shot me a look from the front row, a perfect little smirk playing on her lips before she whispered something to the girl next to her. They both giggled. In that moment, I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. The invitation had to be a prank, a cruel, elaborate prank to get the quiet, invisible girl to show up in a fancy dress, only to be publicly humiliated. My eyes started to prickle with tears. I wouldn't cry, I would not give them the satisfaction. I turned, looking for an adult, anyone who could help. I saw Mrs. Davison, the vice principal, near the stage, her clipboard in hand, looking stressed. I hurried over to her, weaving through the last of the arriving families. "Excuse me, Mrs. Davison," I said, my voice barely a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes flicking over my dress with a vaguely dismissive air. "Yes? We're about to begin. You need to find your seat." "That's the problem," I stammered, my hands twisting the strap of my purse. "I can't find my seat card. My name is Sarah Jenkins. I received an invitation, but my name isn't on any of the chairs." Mrs. Davison sighed, a gust of impatient air. She scanned her clipboard, her finger flying down the list. "Jenkins, Jenkins." "I don't see you on the reserved seating list, dear. Are you sure you're in the right section? General admission is in the back." "But the letter—" I fumbled in my purse, my fingers shaking as I pulled out the folded, cream-colored envelope. I held it out to her like evidence, like proof that I wasn't crazy. She barely glanced at it. "There must have been a misprint. I'm sorry, Sarah, but the ceremony is starting. Just find an empty seat in the back rows. It'll be fine." She patted my arm in a gesture that was meant to be comforting, but felt utterly patronizing, and then she turned away, her attention already on the much more important task of ensuring the student council president's name was pronounced correctly. "It'll be fine." The words echoed in my head as I stood there, frozen in the aisle. The house lights began to dim, casting the auditorium in a soft, expectant glow. I was trapped. To walk all the way to the back now would be a walk of shame, every eye following me, the girl who didn't belong. My throat closed up. The beautiful dress felt like a costume for a fool. I should just leave. I could slip out a side door, call a cab, and be home before my mom even knew. I could tell her they gave me a certificate and that it was boring. I could protect her from my humiliation. I took a half step toward the exit, my heart pounding a frantic retreat. But then the spotlight hit the stage, illuminating the podium and the school crest on the curtain behind it. The principal, Mr. Harrison, walked into the light. He was an imposing, granite-faced man whose smiles were so rare they were spoken about for weeks. He tapped the microphone, the sharp sound echoing through the now silent auditorium. "Good evening, parents, faculty, and honored students," he began, his deep voice filling the space. "Welcome to our 27th Annual Awards Night, a night to celebrate the exceptional talent and dedication that defines Northwood High." My escape was cut off. I was pinned by hundreds of eyes, all focused on the stage. I stood motionless in the aisle, a solitary, miserable statue. I decided I would just have to wait for him to finish his opening remarks, and then I would slip away in the cover of the first round of applause. He spoke about achievement and legacy, his words washing over me. I felt a single hot tear escape and trace a path down my cheek. This was it, the absolute low point of my high school career. Mr. Harrison picked up the first envelope from the podium. "We begin tonight with our awards for excellence in the literary arts." My heart gave a painful lurch. He cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the front rows, presumably looking for the recipient. He was about to announce the first winner. This was my chance to disappear. I took a deep breath, gathered the shreds of my dignity, and turned to leave. But then he stopped, mid-sentence. The silence that followed was abrupt and deafening. He wasn't looking at the envelope anymore. He was looking out over the heads of the students in the front row, his gaze sweeping across the auditorium until it landed on me. A hush fell over the crowd as every head turned to follow his line of sight. My blood ran cold. He leaned into the microphone, and his voice boomed through the speakers, not to announce an award, but to ask a question that felt like a physical blow, a question directed squarely at me. "Miss Jenkins, why are you standing?" Every sound in the auditorium seemed to magnify and warp. The rustle of a program, a muffled cough, the collective intake of breath, it all swirled together into a roaring in my ears. 1,000 eyes were on me, pinning me to the spot. I felt naked, exposed, a single glitch in an otherwise perfect program. My brain short-circuited. I couldn't form a thought, let alone a sentence. Mr. Harrison's question hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable. Why was I standing? Because I was a fool. Because I was nobody. Because my seat card, my proof of belonging, didn't exist. He leaned into the microphone again, and his voice, though not raised, seemed to crackle with authority. "Miss Jenkins," he repeated, a frown creasing his granite features. "Please, the ceremony cannot proceed until our first honoree is seated." Honoree. The word detonated in the silent auditorium. It ricocheted around my skull. Incomprehensible. Honoree? Me? Whispers erupted in the rows around me, a wildfire of murmurs. Heads swiveled between me, a trembling statue of humiliation in the aisle, and the stern-faced principal on the stage. I saw Jessica Albright's perfect brow furrow in confusion, her smirk replaced with a look of genuine disbelief. It couldn't be. The Sarah Jenkins she knew, the quiet girl who scribbled in a notebook and ate lunch alone, was an honoree? The idea was as ludicrous to her as it was to me. The shock of the word finally broke my paralysis. I found my voice, though it came out as a weak, reedy thing. I'm sorry, sir," I whispered, though the microphone on stage seemed to pick it up and amplify it for the entire world to hear. There wasn't a seat for me. My name. It wasn't there. Mr. Harrison's face, already stern, hardened into something else entirely. It was a look of controlled fury. His eyes darted away from me, scanning the side of the stage. "Mrs. Davison," he said, his voice dropping the formal, ceremonial tone. It was sharp now, like chipping ice. "A word, if you please." Vice Principal Davison, who had been trying to blend into the shadows by the curtains, flinched as if struck. She scurried toward the podium, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. "Yes, Principal Harrison," she stammered, her face pale in the harsh spotlight. "Can you explain?" he said, his voice dangerously low but carrying through the microphone nonetheless. "Why our first award recipient of the evening has no place to sit." He gestured towards me with a sweep of his hand. "A clerical error, sir. I'm sure of it," Mrs. Davison said, her voice trembling. "There must have been a misprint on the list I was given. I told Sarah to just find a seat in the back." "You told her to go to the back?" Mr. Harrison cut her off, his disbelief evident. "You told the recipient of the Chancellor's Award for Literary Excellence to sit in general admission?" "The Chancellor's Award." The name meant nothing to me, but it clearly meant something to everyone else. A new wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't some minor participation trophy. This was something important, something real. My legs felt like they were about to give out from under me. Mr. Harrison didn't wait for Mrs. Davison's answer. He turned his gaze back to the front row, his eyes sweeping over the cream of Northwood High's crop. He didn't have to search for long. He knew exactly where the best seats were. His eyes landed on the chair next to Mark Peterson, the quarterback. The chair where Jessica Albright was sitting, looking as if she had just swallowed a lemon. "Miss Albright," Mr. Harrison's voice boomed, leaving no room for argument. "This ceremony has been delayed long enough. Please find another seat. This one belongs to Miss Jenkins." The humiliation in the room shifted so fast it gave me whiplash. It lifted off my shoulders and landed squarely on Jessica Albright. Her face, a moment ago a mask of confused superiority, contorted with pure, unadulterated rage. Her cheeks flushed a deep, ugly red. For a moment I thought she might refuse, but no one refused Mr. Harrison. She stood up, her movements stiff and jerky, snatching her beaded clutch from the seat. She shot me a look of such concentrated venom that I physically recoiled. If looks could kill, I would have been incinerated on the spot. Without a word, she stalked up the aisle, forcing an usher to find her a new seat somewhere in the 5th row, the very row I had been desperately searching just minutes before. The front row seat was empty. It was waiting for me. Mr. Harrison looked at me, a flicker of something almost kind in his eyes. "Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice returning to its formal tone, "your seat." My feet moved before my brain could process it. I walked the longest 10 yards of my life, down the aisle, past the rows of stunned faces, my cheap heels silent on the plush carpet. It wasn't a walk of shame. It was something else entirely, something terrifying and exhilarating. I felt like an astronaut taking a first step on a new planet. I reached the seat, the velvet plush and impossibly soft. Jessica's name card was still there. I picked it up, folded the pristine white card in half with a satisfying crack, and slipped it into my purse. Then I sat down. The auditorium was still buzzing. Mr. Harrison returned to the podium and cleared his throat, waiting for silence. When it came, it was absolute. Every single person was waiting to see what would happen next, what I had done to deserve this unprecedented disruption. As I was saying, he began, picking up the thick, cream-colored envelope. He looked directly at me, 100 feet away, but it felt like he was speaking only to me. The Chancellor's Award for Literary Excellence is our most prestigious arts award. It is not given lightly. The recipient is chosen by a panel of university professors and published authors, and this year, the competition was the fiercest it has ever been. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. My heart was a drum solo in my chest. What was happening? What had I done? My stories were my secrets, scribbled in a notebook I kept hidden under my mattress. No one had ever read them. No one. Mr. Harrison opened the envelope and pulled out a certificate. "This year's recipient," he announced, his voice ringing with a gravity I'd never heard before, produced a work of such maturity, emotional depth, and startling originality that the panel's decision was, in their own words, instantaneous and unanimous. He held my gaze. "This award is not for an essay or a class assignment. It is for a full-length manuscript, submitted anonymously to the State Literary Fellowship for Young Writers. A manuscript that has not only won this award, but has also been forwarded to a major publishing house in New York for consideration." He took a deep breath, and the final words hit me like a physical force, knocking the air from my lungs and sending my entire world spinning off its axis. The award goes to Sarah Jenkins for her novel, The Girl Who Stole the Moon. The Girl Who Stole the Moon. The title echoed in the cavernous space of the auditorium, but it felt like it was being screamed inside my own head. My book, my secret, my world. It was a story I had started writing 2 years ago after my dad left, a fantasy world I'd built to escape the crushing reality of our tiny apartment and my mom's exhaustion. The protagonist, Luna, was everything I wasn't: brave, reckless, powerful. She had a voice that could command the stars. I, on the other hand, could barely command enough voice to order a coffee. How did they know? How did they have my manuscript? My blood turned to ice water in my veins. My mind raced, frantically trying to connect the dots. The State Literary Fellowship for Young Writers. I remembered seeing a flyer for it tacked to the bulletin board in the library months ago. I'd stared at it for a long time, the words, "Submit your manuscript," calling to me like a siren's song. I'd imagined, just for a second, what it would be like. To be read, to be heard, but I dismissed it. It was for other people, for real writers. Then it hit me, like a punch to the gut. Mrs. Gable, my English teacher. She was the only other person on the planet who knew my secret. I'd made the mistake of leaving my notebook on my desk after class one day. She'd called me back, holding it in her hands, a strange, thoughtful expression on her face. "This is remarkable, Sarah," she'd said, tapping the cover. I'd been mortified, convinced she was going to report me for not paying attention in class. Instead, she asked me to stay after school, and for an entire semester, she'd become my secret editor, my mentor. She'd pushed me to finish the book, to polish it until it shone. A week before the fellowship deadline, she'd asked if she could borrow the manuscript. Just to look over the final chapter one more time, she'd said. I trusted her completely. She must have submitted it for me, anonymously. My head spun with the betrayal and the terrifying, breathtaking gratitude of it all. She had believed in me when I hadn't believed in myself. A wave of applause broke through my daze. It started slowly, then swelled, washing over me. People were clapping. For me. For the girl who stole the moon. I looked out at the sea of faces. They weren't faces of pity or annoyance anymore. They were curious, impressed, shocked. I saw Mark Peterson, the quarterback, turn in his seat to look at me, his brow raised in a silent, surprised acknowledgement. I saw other students I barely knew clapping, their expressions ones of genuine awe. Mr. Harrison was beckoning me to the stage. I stood on trembling legs, the sapphire blue dress suddenly feeling like it fit perfectly. It felt like armor. I walked toward the stage, my footsteps echoing in the momentary lull in the applause. The 3 short steps up onto the stage felt like climbing a mountain. Mr. Harrison handed me the heavy framed certificate. My name was embossed in gold right below the award's title. It was real. This was all real. Congratulations, Miss Jenkins, he said, his voice softer now that he wasn't using the microphone. He shook my hand, his grip firm and steady. You've made this school very proud. I managed a choked, thank you, before turning to face the audience. The applause started up again, louder this time. The stage lights were hot and blinding, but through the glare I could see them, all of them. And in that moment, I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. I was an author. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. More names were called, more awards were given, but my mind was miles away, caught between the shock and a soaring, unfamiliar feeling of joy. When it finally ended, I was mobbed. Students and parents I'd never spoken to came up to congratulate me. Mrs. Gable found me, her eyes shining with tears. I knew it, Sarah, she whispered, hugging me tightly. I knew you had it in you. I hope you can forgive my little deception. I hugged her back, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Forgive her. She had just changed my entire life. But for every well-wisher, there was a shadow. I could feel Jessica Albright's eyes on me from across the room. She was standing with her circle of friends, their heads close together, whispering. The venom in her stare hadn't faded. It had sharpened. My moment of triumph was an insult to her, a disruption of the natural order of things. In her world, girls like me didn't win. We certainly didn't unseat her from the front row. I pushed her from my mind. I had to call my mom. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling with excitement. As I navigated through the crowd towards the lobby, someone stepped into my path, blocking my way. It was Mark Peterson. The Mark Peterson. He was even taller up close. Hey, he said, a slow, easy smile spreading across his face. It was the kind of smile that usually made my insides shrivel up with insecurity, but tonight was different. That was... seriously cool? A whole novel? Wow. Thanks, I stammered, feeling the familiar blush creep up my neck. No, for real, he said, leaning against a pillar. I saw Jessica's face when they kicked her out of your seat. Priceless, she's had it coming. He chuckled. Listen, a bunch of us are going to a party after this to celebrate. You should come. A party? With Mark Peterson? The idea was so foreign, so outside the realm of my reality, that I almost laughed. Oh, I don't know, I said, glancing towards the exit. I should probably get home. Come on, he coaxed. It'll be fun. You deserve to celebrate. We can give you a ride. He gestured to a group of his friends, all popular, all beautiful, all watching us with curious eyes. For the first time in my life, I was being invited in. The door to their world, a world that had always been sealed shut to me, was creaking open. A part of me, the old, insecure Sarah, screamed to run home and hide. But another part, a new, braver part that felt a little like my character Luna, was intrigued. I had faced down a whole auditorium. Maybe I could face down a party. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word surprising me as much as it did him. "Okay, I'll come." His smile widened. "Awesome! We're just waiting for a couple more people. We'll leave in 10. He walked back to his friends, and I watched him go, my heart doing a strange little flip. Maybe things were finally changing. I leaned against the wall, a giddy smile on my face, clutching my award like a life raft. I took out my phone again to text my mom that I'd be home a little late. As I was typing, a text message from an unknown number popped up on my screen. I frowned, opening it. There was no text, just a picture. It was a screenshot of an email sent 2 weeks ago. My blood ran cold as I read the sender's name, Jessica Albright. The recipient was Mrs. Davison, and the subject line made my breath catch in my throat. It read, "Award Night Seating Chart, Urgent Correction." The body of the email was short and brutal. "Mrs. Davison, there seems to be a mistake on the draft seating chart. Sarah Jenkins is listed in the front row. As you know, she is not an honors student. This seat is clearly meant for me. Please correct this embarrassing error before the final cards are printed." The party, the award, the congratulations, it all faded away, replaced by a cold, sickening clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a clerical error. My missing seat card wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. Jessica had tried to erase me. Then a second message from the same unknown number came through, chilling me to the bone. "She didn't just try to move your seat. Look what she did to your book." Attached was a link. My hand was shaking so hard I could barely press it. It led to a blog, a popular, gossipy school blog that everyone read. The top post, published just an hour ago, was titled, "Northwood's New Literary Genius is a Fraud." And below the headline was the first page of The Girl Who Stole the Moon. My words, my secret story, plastered for the whole world to see. But that wasn't the worst part. Scrawled across the page in a digital red pen were accusations, line by line, comparing my sentences to passages from famous fantasy novels, with the final damning words circled at the bottom: total ripoff, plagiarism. The word was a lit match dropped into a pool of gasoline. My vision tunneled, the buzzing lobby of the auditorium fading into a muffled roar. All I could see were those red digital slashes across my words. My soul. Total ripoff. It was a brand. A scarlet letter burned onto the page. My legs gave out and I slid down the cool marble wall, my sapphire dress pooling around me like a dark omen. My award, the heavy, beautiful symbol of my triumph, slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floor. My book wasn't a ripoff. It was my life. Of course, it was influenced by the books I loved, the stories that were my only friends on lonely nights. Every writer stands on the shoulders of giants. But my characters, my world, my plot, they were born from my own grief and my own hope. Luna wasn't a copy of some other heroine. She was the girl I wished I could be. To have that twisted, to have my most private creation labeled a cheap imitation, a fraud, it was a violation so profound I couldn't breathe. Who sent this? Who would do this? The answer was obvious and sickening. The first text, the screenshot of the email, that was a warning, a tip-off. Someone was trying to show me what Jessica was capable of. But the blog post? That was pure Jessica, vicious, calculated, and designed for maximum damage. She hadn't just tried to erase my name from a seat card. She was trying to erase my voice, my talent, my future. She was trying to poison the single greatest moment of my life. I scrolled down the blog post with a trembling thumb. The comments section was already a cesspool. OMG, I knew it. No way that quiet girl wrote a whole book. I always thought she was weird. Someone should tell the principal. They should take back that award. And then one that made my stomach clench into a tight, painful knot. Jessica Albright posted about this on her Instagram story. Said she's been trying to warn people about Sarah the plagiarist for weeks. Justice for real writers. Her Instagram story. She was broadcasting it, blasting it out to her thousands of followers, cementing the lie before the truth could even put on its shoes. This wasn't just high school gossip anymore. This was a public execution. My reputation, my one chance at a future I'd never even dared to dream of, was being shredded online in real time. The mention of a publisher in New York. What if they saw this? What if they believed it? "Hey, you okay?" Mark Peterson was standing over me, his easy smile gone, replaced by a look of concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just held up my phone, the screen glowing with the hateful blog post. He took it, his brow furrowing as he read. I watched his face change, his jaw tightening. "Jessica," he muttered, his voice low and angry. He scrolled through the comments, his expression growing darker with every one. "This is insane. She's unhinged." He handed the phone back to me, crouching down to my level. "Don't listen to this, Sarah. This is just her being a sore loser. Everyone knows what she's like." "But they're believing her," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Look at the comments. They all believe her." "Because they're idiots," he said fiercely. "This isn't about your book. This is about you taking her seat. It's that simple. She can't stand that someone else got the spotlight for 5 minutes." He stood up, offering me a hand. "Come on, get up. You can't let her win." I took his hand, and his grip was surprisingly strong. He pulled me to my feet. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice small. "How do I fight this?" "You don't," he said, and my heart sank. "Not yet. Right now, you come to this party. You hold your head up high and you act like her pathetic little blog post means nothing to you. That's what will piss her off more than anything. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you fall apart." He picked up my award from the floor, dusted it off, and pressed it back into my hands. "Don't let her take this from you, too." He was right. Hiding would be admitting guilt. Crying would be a victory for her. I had to face this. I took a shaky breath, squared my shoulders, and nodded. Okay. The drive to the party was surreal. I was squeezed into the back seat of Mark's expensive SUV between 2 cheerleaders who were chattering about after-prom plans. They kept glancing at me, their eyes full of a new, complicated kind of curiosity. I was no longer just the invisible girl. I was now the main character in the school's biggest drama. Mark kept catching my eye in the rearview mirror, giving me small, encouraging nods. The party was at a massive house in the wealthiest part of town. Music pulsed from inside, and the lawn was already littered with students. Walking in with Mark Peterson and his entourage was like parting the Red Sea. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. Everyone had been on their phones. Everyone had seen the blog post. I could feel their stares, some sympathetic, many more judgmental. The whispers followed me like a cloud of gnats. Jessica was holding court by the pool, a smug, triumphant look on her face. She was surrounded by her friends, all of them looking at me with undisguised contempt. When she saw me walk in, her eyes widened in surprise, her smirk faltering for just a fraction of a second. She clearly expected me to be at home, crying into my pillow. She didn't expect me to show up at her victory party. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "If it isn't the famous author, shouldn't you be at home trying to figure out which book to steal from next?" A few of her friends snickered. The music seemed to dip, the entire party's attention focused on our standoff. Mark stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of me. "Knock it off, Jessica," he said, his voice cold. "You're just embarrassing yourself." "Embarrassing myself?" She laughed, a high, sharp sound. "I'm the one standing up for artistic integrity. Or are you so desperate for a new girlfriend that you'd side with a common thief?" The insult was aimed at him, but the poison was for me. A wave of shame washed over me. I wanted to run. I wanted to disappear. But then I felt the cool, smooth frame of my award in my hand. I thought of my mom, working a double shift so I could have this night. I thought of Mrs. Gable, who believed in me so fiercely she'd risked my anger to give me a chance. I wasn't a thief, I was a writer, and I would not let Jessica Albright tear me down. I took a step out from behind Mark, my heart hammering against my ribs. I met Jessica's hateful gaze with my own. "You know, for someone who claims to care so much about writing," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "you don't seem to have actually read my book." Jessica scoffed. "Oh, I've read enough to see how you ripped off half the fantasy section of the library." "Then you'd know," I continued, taking another step closer, "that the main character, Luna, has a unique birthmark on her left wrist, the shape of a broken moon." The whispers around us died down. Everyone was listening. "You'd know that she lives in a clockwork city powered by captured starlight, and you'd know that the villain isn't some dark lord, but her own brother, who is trying to steal her power not for himself, but to save their dying mother." I let the details hang in the air, details that were mine and mine alone. "Tell me, Jessica," I said, my voice gaining strength. "Which book did I steal all of that from? I'd love to know, because I've looked, and I can't seem to find it anywhere." A dead silence fell over the party. Jessica's smug expression wavered. She hadn't read it. Of course she hadn't. She'd just skimmed the first page, looking for anything she could twist into an accusation. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, floundering. She'd been so sure of her victory, so certain I would crumble. She never expected me to fight back. I wasn't finished. I held up my phone, the screen still showing the text from the anonymous number. "You also seem to have a problem with seating charts," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound confidence. "It must be so difficult when the world doesn't arrange itself exactly how you want it." Her face went pale. The screenshot. She knew what it was. Her friends were looking at her now, their expression shifting from sycophantic support to confusion. The crowd was turning. The narrative was changing. I had taken back control. Just as I was about to deliver the final blow, to show everyone the proof of her petty sabotage, my phone buzzed again with a new message from the same unknown number. My eyes flickered down to the screen, and the words I saw there stopped my heart cold, erasing my momentary triumph and replacing it with a fresh wave of terror. It was a single, chilling sentence. "Be careful, Sarah. What she did to your book is nothing compared to what she did to Mrs. Gable." What she did to Mrs. Gable. The words on the screen seemed to detach from reality, floating in front of my eyes. The poolside scene, the stunned faces, Jessica's panicked expression, it all dissolved into a blurry watercolor backdrop. My newfound courage evaporated, replaced by a chilling dread that was colder and sharper than anything I'd felt before. This wasn't about a book or a seat anymore. This was about Mrs. Gable, my mentor, the one person who had seen something in me. What could Jessica have possibly done to her? My silence hung in the air, a question mark. The crowd, sensing a shift in the drama, leaned in. Jessica, seeing her chance to recover, seized the moment. "What's wrong, Sarah?" she sneered, her voice dripping with mock concern. "Cat got your tongue, or did you just run out of other people's lines to steal?" I barely heard her. My mind was racing, connecting terrifying dots. Mrs. Gable hadn't been at the awards ceremony tonight. I'd noticed her absence, but assumed she was just home with the flu or had a family commitment. But now her absence felt sinister. Mrs. Gable had been the one to submit my manuscript. She was the architect of my success, and therefore she was the primary obstacle to Jessica's sense of entitlement. If Jessica was willing to publicly accuse me of plagiarism and sabotage a seating chart, what would she be willing to do to the teacher who made it all happen? I have to go, I stammered, shoving my phone into my purse. The party atmosphere felt suffocating, the whispers and stares like tiny needles against my skin. "What's the matter?" Jessica taunted, stepping closer. "Can't handle the heat. I guess it's easy to be brave when you're hiding behind a teacher's pet reputation. "Leave her alone, Jessica," Mark said, his voice a low growl. He put a hand on my arm. "I'll take you home." But I wasn't going home. I had to find Mrs. Gable. I had to know she was okay. I pulled away from Mark's grasp. "No, I'm fine. I need some air." Before anyone could stop me, I turned and pushed my way through the throng of students, ignoring their curious looks and Jessica's triumphant laughter echoing behind me. I stumbled out the front door and into the cool night air, gasping for breath as if I'd been holding it for hours. My first instinct was to call her. I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying across the screen, and hit the call button for Mrs. Gable. It rang once, twice, 3 times, then went straight to a cold, robotic voicemail. "The subscriber you have dialed is not available." I tried again. Same result. Panic began its icy ascent up my spine. This wasn't right. Mrs. Gable always answered her phone. I didn't have a car. I was miles from her house, stuck in the rich part of town with no way out except for the partygoers I had just fled. My $20 cab fare was still tucked in my purse, a flimsy solution for a problem that was growing more monstrous by the second. I started walking, fast, down the long, tree-lined driveway, my heels sinking into the manicured lawn. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away, had to think. A pair of headlights swept over me, and Mark's SUV pulled up beside me. "Sarah, get in," he commanded, leaning over to open the passenger door. "You can't walk home from here." "I'm not going home," I said, my voice tight with panic. "I have to go to Mrs. Gable's house. Something's wrong." He didn't question me. He just nodded, his expression serious. "Okay, get in. Tell me the address." The drive was a tense blur. I gave him the directions, my mind a frantic slideshow of horrible possibilities. Had Jessica threatened her? Gotten her in trouble somehow? The anonymous texter had said, "What she did to your book." Past tense. But they'd said, "What she did to Mrs. Gable," also past tense. It had already happened. "What do you think she did?" Mark asked, breaking the silence as we sped through the empty suburban streets. "I don't know," I confessed, twisting the strap of my purse. "Jessica's dad is on the school board, right? He's the chairman or something." Mark nodded grimly. "Yeah, Richard Albright. He basically owns half the town. Thinks he owns the school, too." And there it was. The missing piece. It wasn't just Jessica's jealousy. It was her father's power, a weapon she could wield without ever getting her own hands dirty, a complaint from a powerful board member about a teacher's inappropriate level of involvement with a student's extracurricular project, a suggestion that maybe a teacher was playing favorites, or worse, helping a student cheat. It could ruin a career. It could get a teacher fired. My blood ran cold. Jessica hadn't just attacked my book. She had gone after the one person who championed it. She was trying to burn down my entire world and everyone in it. We pulled onto Mrs. Gable's quiet residential street. The houses were dark, sleeping, all except for one. As we approached her small, charming bungalow, a flicker of movement in the front window caught my eye. We parked across the street, and I saw it clearly. The front door was slightly ajar. A thin slice of yellow light spilled out onto the porch steps. "That's her house?" Mark asked, his voice low. "Why is the door open?" "She would never leave her door open," I whispered, a new, more visceral fear taking hold. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was wrong. I got out of the car, my heels crunching on the asphalt. "Sarah, wait," Mark called, getting out after me. "Maybe we should call the police." "And say what? That my English teacher's door is open and she's not answering her phone?" I shook my head, my heart pounding. "I have to see if she's okay." I walked across the lawn, the damp grass soaking the hem of my dress. Mark was right behind me. The silence of the street was unnerving. As I reached the porch, I could hear something from inside the house. A faint, rhythmic sound. Thump, thump, thump. "Mrs. Gable?" I called out, my voice trembling as I pushed the door open wider. "Are you home?" The entryway was dark, but the living room to the left was illuminated by a single lamp, and what I saw there made the world tilt on its axis. The room was in disarray. Books were pulled from the shelves, papers were scattered across the floor. In the center of the room, a large cardboard packing box sat open, half filled with personal effects. Framed photos, a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Teacher," a stack of well-loved novels. And Mrs. Gable was there. She was on her knees beside the box, her back to me. She was holding a heavy hardback book in her hands, raising it a few inches and dropping it into the box, over and over. Thump, thump, thump. She didn't seem to have heard me. She looked broken, defeated. "Mrs. Gable?" I said again, louder this time, stepping into the room. She froze. Slowly she turned her head. Her face was pale and tear-streaked, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. They were the eyes of someone who had lost everything. She looked at me, and for a moment, there was no recognition. Then her expression crumpled, and a fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. "Sarah," she choked out, her voice raw with grief. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here." "What happened?" I asked, rushing to her side, Mark following hesitantly behind me. "What's all this? Are you moving?" She let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "You could say that." She gestured around the chaotic room with a shaking hand. "The school board held an emergency disciplinary hearing this afternoon. Mr. Albright filed a formal complaint against me." "What kind of complaint?" Mark demanded, his voice tight with anger. Mrs. Gable looked from me to Mark, then down at the floor, unable to meet our eyes. "He accused me of academic fraud. He claimed I co-opted your manuscript, Sarah, that I submitted it without your knowledge in an attempt to advance my own career, and that I pressured the awards committee. He brought in a sworn statement." My head swam. A sworn statement? From who? "Whose statement?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Mrs." Gable finally looked up, her eyes filled with a pain and betrayal so profound it stole the breath from my lungs. "It was from a student," she said, her voice breaking. "A student who claimed they overheard us in the classroom. They swore that I told you I was going to take your little story and make it my ticket out of this town." She took a shuddering breath, the final words landing like a death sentence. "The school board voted unanimously. As of 5 o'clock this afternoon, I was terminated. I have to have my house cleared out by the end of the weekend." Terminated. The word hung in the devastated room, an obscene monument to Jessica Albright's cruelty. It wasn't just a job. It was Mrs. Gable's life. Her reputation, her home, her future, all of it, incinerated on the pyre of a rich girl's tantrum. The lie was so audacious, so twisted, it was almost brilliant in its wickedness. It took the truth, Mrs. Gable's secret, selfless support of me, and warped it into a narrative of selfish ambition. "But that's a lie," I cried, the words feeling utterly inadequate. "A complete lie. We can tell them the truth. I'll tell them. I'll tell them you did nothing but help me, that you're the only reason any of this happened." Mrs. Gable gave a weary, heartbreaking shake of her head. "It doesn't matter, Sarah. It's your word against a sworn statement, and behind that statement is the full weight of Richard Albright. He's the school board chairman. Who do you think they're going to believe? An honor roll student whose father is their boss, or the quiet scholarship girl and the teacher he just painted as a manipulative fraud?" "What student?" Mark's voice was like flint. "Who was it? Who gave the statement?" Mrs. Gable hesitated, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. I can't say. They wouldn't give me the name, citing the student's privacy." "Of course they wouldn't," Mark scoffed, pacing the small living room like a caged tiger. "So they can destroy your career based on an anonymous accusation? That can't be legal." "When you have enough money and enough power, you can make anything legal," she said, her voice devoid of hope. She looked at me, a deep, sorrowful apology in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never wanted this. I just wanted you to have a chance. I thought the work would speak for itself, that it would be enough to protect us." "This isn't your fault," I said, my own anger beginning to burn through the shock, a hot, clean rage that felt like a furnace being lit in my chest. "This is Jessica's fault, and her father's, and we are not going to let them get away with it." For the first time that night, a flicker of something other than despair crossed Mrs. Gable's face. It was surprise. She was seeing a version of me she had only ever read about on the pages of my notebook. She was seeing Luna. "What can we do?" she whispered. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But we're not going to let them win. There has to be a way to prove they're lying." My phone buzzed in my hand, another text from the unknown number. My fingers were shaking as I opened it. They used one of Jessica's friends for the statement, a girl named Emily Carter. "She's on the debate team. Jessica promised her the captain position next year if she did it." Emily Carter, I knew her. She was one of the girls who had been whispering with Jessica in the front row, one of the girls who had been laughing at the party. I showed the text to Mark and Mrs. Gable. "Emily Carter would do anything Jessica told her to," Mark said, disgust twisting his features. "But it's still her word against ours. A sworn statement is a legal document." "Then we need more than words," I said, my mind racing. "We need proof, hard proof, something that Mr. Albright can't bury and the school board can't ignore." But what? What proof could possibly exist? It was a he said, she said situation, deliberately engineered to be airtight. A thought sparked in my mind, a crazy, desperate idea. The anonymous texter. This person knew everything. The seating chart email, the blog post, the secret deal with Emily Carter. They were my only advantage, a ghost in the machine. "Who is this?" Mark asked, pointing to my phone. "Who is sending you all this?" "I don't know," I said. "The number's blocked, but they're on our side. They see what Jessica is doing." I typed a quick message, my thumb flying across the screen. "Who are you? How do you know all this?" We waited, the three of us standing in the wreckage of Mrs. Gable's living room, the silence stretching out. A minute passed, then two. My heart sank. Maybe I had pushed too far. Maybe they were scared of being discovered. Then the phone buzzed. The reply was short. "I'm someone who believes you can't build your own success on the ruins of someone else's. As for how I know, Jessica is careless. She talks, and she texts. She likes to brag. She texts." The words hung in the air. Texts, emails, digital footprints. Jessica was arrogant. She was sloppy. She would have documented her plan, gloated about her victory to her friends. The sworn statement was official, but the conspiracy behind it was probably laid out in a dozen iMessages. "We need her phone," I said, the words tasting audacious and insane. "Or her computer. The proof will be there, texts to Emily Carter, emails to her dad, something." "And how are we supposed to do that, Sarah?" Mrs. Gable asked, looking at me like I'd suggested we fly to the moon. "Break into her house?" "The party," Mark said suddenly, his eyes widening. "She's still at the party. Her house is empty." "No," Mrs. Gable said immediately. "Absolutely not. That's breaking and entering. It's a crime. You can't risk it." "What you're doing right now is a crime," I retorted, gesturing to the packing boxes. "Packing up your life because a rich man snapped his fingers. Jessica and her father are counting on us to play by the rules while they break every single one of them. Well, I'm done playing by their rules." I looked at Mark, a silent question passing between us. His expression was a mixture of shock and admiration. He had offered me a ride to a party, and now I was suggesting we commit a felony. But he saw the fire in my eyes. He saw the stakes. He nodded slowly. "I can get us in," he said quietly. "I've been to her house 100 times. They have a security system, but I know the code. It's her birthday." "Mark, no," Mrs. Gable pleaded. "You'll ruin your future, your scholarship." "My scholarship is to play football," he said, his voice hard. "It has nothing to do with what a monster like Richard Albright thinks of me. But your career, Sarah's reputation, that's what they're trying to ruin. We can't let them." It was settled. The plan was insane, reckless, and probably doomed to fail. But it was better than doing nothing. It was better than letting Mrs. Gable pack another box. We convinced her to wait, to not give up just yet, and promised to call her the second we had anything. The drive to the Albrights' mansion was a new kind of terrifying. This wasn't social anxiety. This was the cold, hard fear of getting caught. The house was a fortress of dark brick and ivy, set far back from the road. The party we'd left was still going, a distant thumping bass line in the night. Jessica's house was dark, just as Mark had predicted. We crept around the back, shielded by perfectly manicured hedges. Mark went straight to the keypad by the French doors leading to the patio. He punched in the numbers, Jessica's birthday. A small green light blinked, and we heard the soft click of the lock disengaging. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. We were in. The inside of the house was like a museum, cold and silent and impossibly clean. "Her room is upstairs," Mark whispered, leading the way. "Second door on the right. Her laptop is usually on her desk." We moved as quietly as we could up the grand, curving staircase. Every creak of a floorboard sounded like a gunshot. We found her room, a palace of white and pink, with a 4-poster bed and a walk-in closet bigger than my bedroom. And there it was, on a sleek white desk, a silver laptop, closed. "Okay," Mark breathed. "Password?" My heart plummeted. Of course. We hadn't thought about a password. We were so focused on getting in that we hadn't planned for the most basic obstacle. "Try her birthday again," I whispered. He typed it in. "Password incorrect." "Try her dog's name." "Princess?" I suggested. "Password incorrect." We were so close. The proof we needed was right there, just inches away, locked behind a wall we couldn't break. We tried every combination we could think of. Her middle name, her mom's name, the name of her horse. Nothing worked. Despair began to set in. This was a stupid plan. We were going to get caught, and for what? My phone vibrated. Another text. My hands were clammy as I read it. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a hint. It was the password itself. Chancellor? Award? The exclamation point was part of it. The password to her computer was the name of my award, the very thing she was trying to destroy. Her arrogance, her obsession, it was going to be her downfall. Mark typed it in. The screen unlocked. We were in. A dozen windows were open: social media, online shopping, and an email client. I took the mouse, my hand steady now, and clicked on her sent folder. And there it was. An email to her father, sent yesterday. The subject line, Gable problem. I clicked it open, and the breath left my body. "Daddy," it began. "I've handled the plagiarism blog post. It's getting tons of traction. But we still need to neutralize the source. I've secured Emily Carter's statement against Mrs. Gable. It's attached. Please use it at the hearing tomorrow to make sure she is fired immediately. We can't have her talking to the publishers about Sarah's stupid little book. This needs to be a clean kill." A clean kill. That's what this was to her. I forwarded the email to myself, to Mark, and to a new email address I created on the spot for Mrs. Gable. We had it, the smoking gun, the undeniable proof of a conspiracy. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. We had won. I looked at Mark, a triumphant grin spreading across my face. He was grinning back, a look of pure adrenaline in his eyes. We did it. Just as we were about to close the laptop and flee, a new email notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It was from a sender I didn't recognize. The subject line was just one word: manuscript. My curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it open. The body of the email was empty, except for a single attachment. It was a PDF file. The file name was a string of numbers followed by the letters SJ, my initials. With a growing sense of dread, I opened the attachment. The first page loaded. It was the title page of a novel. My novel, The Girl Who Stole the Moon, by Sarah Jenkins. But that's not what made my blood freeze in my veins. It was the digital watermark, faint but unmistakable, in the background of the page. It was a logo. The logo of a massive, well-known publishing house. And below that, in the bottom corner of the page, was a small typed line of text. A line I had never seen before. A line that changed everything. A line that made the plagiarism and the firing and everything else feel like a prelude to the real horror. It said, "Internal use only, acquired for adaptation by Albright Entertainment." Albright Entertainment. The name punched the air out of my lungs. It was Richard Albright's company, a film and television production company, a minor player trying to break into the big leagues, known for buying up the rights to obscure books and turning them into low-budget streaming movies. The pieces of the puzzle, pieces I didn't even know existed, slammed together in my mind with the force of a car crash. This was never about a high school award. It was never about a front row seat or Jessica's jealousy. That was all a smokescreen, a vicious, petty, and brutally effective smokescreen. This was bigger. This was business. They weren't trying to discredit my book. They were trying to steal it. The plagiarism accusation. It wasn't just to humiliate me. It was to devalue my work, to create a cloud of scandal around the manuscript so that if and when they announced their project, no one would look too closely at the unknown author. They could claim they bought the rights for pennies from a disgraced student, or worse, that they had developed a similar idea internally and she was the one who had stolen from them. Mrs. Gable. Getting her fired wasn't just revenge. It was a strategic move to silence my only professional advocate, the only adult who knew the manuscript's history and its true worth. They were isolating me, cutting me off from any support system, making me a pariah. It was a corporate takeover executed with the tactics of a high school bully. It was monstrous. "Sarah? What is it?" Mark's voice cut through the roaring in my ears. He had seen my face, seen the color drain from it. I couldn't form words. I just pointed a trembling finger at the screen, at the watermark, at the words Albright Entertainment. He leaned in, his eyes scanning the page. I watched the realization dawn on his face, his triumphant grin curdling into a mask of pure fury. "That son of a bitch," he breathed, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "He's not just helping Jessica. He's using her. This is his play." We stood there for a second, frozen in the sterile white and pink bedroom, the air thick with the enormity of what we had discovered. We had come for proof of a high school conspiracy and stumbled into a corporate crime. The email I'd forwarded, the one about the clean kill, was no longer just evidence of slander. It was evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. "We have to get out of here," I whispered, my voice hoarse. The house, which had felt empty and silent, now felt alive with threat. Every shadow seemed to hold a pair of eyes. Every creak of the floorboards was a footstep on the stairs. Mark snapped back to action. "You're right." He quickly closed the laptop, his movements precise and controlled. "Don't touch anything else." We backed out of the room, pulling the door until it was almost shut just as we'd found it. We retraced our steps down the grand staircase, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs with every step. I was terrified the front door would open, that Jessica and her father would be standing there, their faces twisted in triumph. But the house remained silent. We slipped out the back doors, Mark resetting the alarm with the code. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep, shuddering breath. We were out. We were safe. For now. We ran across the manicured lawn, not stopping until we were back in the safety of Mark's SUV, the engine rumbling to life. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice shaking as he sped away from the curb, leaving the dark, menacing fortress behind us. We can't just go to Principal Harrison with this. This is bigger than him. This is bigger than the school." "I know," Mark said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Richard Albright has judges and politicians in his pocket. If we go to the police, he'll bury this. He'll turn it around on us. He'll paint us as delinquent kids who broke into his house and forged evidence because you were mad about a blog post." He was right. We had the proof, but our credibility was zero. We were two teenagers against one of the most powerful men in the city. The story was too perfect for him. The star quarterback and the troubled girl, a modern-day Bonnie and Clyde in a fit of teenage angst. They would crucify us. "We have to give it to someone he can't control," I said, thinking aloud. "Someone he can't buy or intimidate, someone who would love nothing more than to take down a guy like Richard Albright." Mark glanced at me, a question in his eyes. "The media," I said, the idea solidifying in my mind. "A real journalist, someone who can verify the evidence, who can protect us as sources, and who can publish a story so big and so loud that the Albrights can't possibly escape it." It was a massive risk. We would be handing our fates and Mrs. Gables over to a stranger. But it was the only move we had left, a desperate Hail Mary pass into the darkness, hoping someone was there to catch it. "I might know a guy," Mark said after a moment. "My uncle. He's an investigative reporter for the city paper. He's old school. Doesn't back down from anyone." It was a sliver of hope, but it was enough. The rest of the drive was spent in silence, our minds racing with the implications of our next move. We drove straight to Mrs. Gables. We found her exactly where we'd left her, sitting on the floor amidst the packing boxes, a cup of untouched tea in her hands. We told her everything: the password, the email, the watermark, Albright Entertainment. We watched her face cycle through disbelief, horror, and finally, a righteous fury that seemed to burn away the last of her despair. She stood up, the teacup rattling in its saucer. "That man," she said, her voice shaking with rage, "tried to buy the rights to your book through the school a month ago. He made a ridiculously low-ball offer through an anonymous LLC, claiming it was for a small educational project. I'm the one who told him to get lost. I told him the manuscript was a special talent and would be going through the proper channels. She had protected me. She had stood between my work and Richard Albright's greed, and for that, he had decided she needed to be destroyed. We spent the next hour crafting the perfect email to Mark's uncle. We laid out the whole story, from the missing seat card to the termination to the attempted theft of my intellectual property. We attached the evidence: the screenshot of Jessica's email to Mrs. Davison, a link to the slanderous blog post, and the crown jewel, the clean kill email from Jessica to her father. We explained about the watermark and the acquisition, but we didn't have a hard copy of that. The journalist would have to take our word for it for now. We sent the email from a new anonymous account, signing off simply as a friend of Northwood High. Then we waited. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Mrs. Gable made a fresh pot of coffee. Mark paced the floor. I sat staring at my phone, willing it to light up. It felt like the entire future was balanced on the head of a pin, waiting for one man's reply. Finally, at nearly 2 a.m, an email came through. It was from the reporter. It was short and to the point. "I've reviewed the documents. This is dynamite. My editor has already approved the story for the front page, but the email from the daughter to the father, while damning, could be challenged as a forgery. The blog post is slander but hard to pin directly on them. To make this story completely bulletproof, I need one more thing: irrefutable, undeniable proof of their intent. I need to see that watermark. I need a copy of that acquired manuscript." My heart sank into my stomach. We didn't have it. We had seen it, but we hadn't had the presence of mind to take a picture or forward that specific file in our panic to escape. We had failed. "We can't go back there," Mark said, reading my expression. "There's no way." It was over. We had come so close, but it wasn't enough. I felt a wave of despair so profound it threatened to drown me. I leaned my head back, closing my eyes, ready to give up. And then my phone buzzed one last time. It was the anonymous number, the ghost in the machine. I opened the message, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't a text this time. It was an attachment, a single PDF file. The file name was a string of numbers followed by the letters SJ. I opened it. It was my manuscript, and on every single page, the Albright Entertainment watermark was clearly, damningly visible. I scrolled to the bottom of the message, and there was one final cryptic sentence from my unknown protector. A sentence that sent a jolt of pure ice through my veins and made me question everything I thought I knew about the night's events. I knew you'd be too scared to download it yourself, so I did it for you, right after you left her room. Right after you left her room. The words hung in my mind, reconfiguring the entire landscape of the night. My anonymous helper wasn't just some well-informed gossip. They weren't just a ghost in the machine. They were in the house. They had been in Jessica Albright's house, in her room, at the same time we were. The thought was both terrifying and electrifying. Who was this person, this guardian angel with the skills of a spy? Were they watching us right now? There was no time to dwell on the mystery. We had what we needed. I immediately forwarded the watermarked PDF to the reporter, my fingers flying across the screen. "Here is your bulletproof evidence," I typed. "Publish it." The reply came back in less than a minute. "Story goes to print in 4 hours. The morning edition will be a collector's item. Stay safe. Stay safe." The words were a stark reminder that this wasn't over. We had fired a cannonball at the Albright Empire. Now we had to brace for the fallout. We left Mrs. Gable's house just as the first hint of gray was lightening the eastern sky. She hugged me tightly at the door, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and a fierce, rekindled hope. "Be careful, Sarah," she whispered. Mark drove me home in a heavy silence, the adrenaline of the night giving way to a bone-deep exhaustion. When he dropped me off at my apartment building, he turned to me, his face serious in the dim light of the dashboard. "Whatever happens, Sarah," he said, "you're the bravest person I know." I slipped into my apartment just as my mom was getting ready to leave for her morning shift at the diner. She saw my dress, now rumpled and stained with grass at the hem, my exhausted face, and the heavy award I was still clutching like a shield. "Honey, what happened?" she asked, her voice laced with worry. "Did you have a good time?" "It's a long story, Mom," I said, managing a weak smile. "But I think everything's about to change." I couldn't tell her the whole truth. Not yet. It was too dangerous, too insane. I just promised I would explain everything later, took a picture of my award for her as I'd promised, and fell into bed, my mind still racing as I collapsed into a dreamless sleep. I woke up a few hours later to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on my nightstand. It was a cacophony of notifications, texts, social media alerts, missed calls. The story had broken. I fumbled for the phone, my heart pounding. The headline of the city paper's digital edition was splashed across my screen in huge, bold letters. "Albright Entertainment School Board Chairman Implicated in Fraud. Slander Scheme Against Scholarship Student." The article was a masterpiece of journalistic demolition. It laid out the entire conspiracy, piece by damning piece. It had quotes from legal experts on the criminality of filing a false sworn statement. It had anonymous sources from within the school district confirming Mr. Albright's history of throwing his weight around, and it had our evidence. Screenshots of the clean kill email, and most powerfully, a page from my manuscript, the Albright Entertainment watermark glowing like a radioactive isotope. The story wasn't just about a school drama, it was about the corrupting influence of wealth and power. A David and Goliath tale that was instantly irresistible. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for the Albrights. By noon, the school district had announced an emergency session and suspended Mr. Albright from his position as chairman, pending a full investigation. The State Literary Fellowship issued a blistering statement in my defense, condemning the unethical and potentially illegal tactics used to try and discredit their award winner. The publishing house in New York that had been considering my manuscript? Their senior fiction editor called me personally. Not only were they still interested, they were fast-tracking my book for a major publication deal, seeing a marketing opportunity that was pure gold. At school, the atmosphere was electric. The blog post slandering me had been taken down, replaced by a groveling apology from the site's student administrator. Jessica Albright did not show up. Neither did Emily Carter. The whispers that followed me in the halls were no longer judgmental. They were awestruck. I was no longer Sarah the plagiarist. I was Sarah the giant slayer. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place that afternoon. I received one last text from my anonymous helper. "Check your email, and congratulations. You earned this." I opened my email and found a message from a name I didn't recognize. The subject line was a confession. The email was from a boy named Kevin, a quiet, tech-savvy kid who was in my AP computer science class. He was also Jessica Albright's cousin. He explained that he had been at her house for a family dinner weeks ago and had overheard her on the phone, bragging to a friend about her plan to ruin me and steal my book for her father. Disgusted by his own family, he had decided to act. He had used his skills to gain remote access to her laptop, monitoring her communications for weeks. He was the one who fed me the information. He was the one who'd been in her room, downloading the manuscript after we'd left, covering our tracks. He said he was coming forward to the school and the press with his own sworn statement, corroborating everything. He ended the email with a simple, powerful sentence. "People like them should not be allowed to win." That evening, the school board held its emergency meeting. It was broadcast on the local news. Mrs. Gable was there, her head held high. Mark and I sat with my mom in the packed auditorium. One by one, board members who had previously bowed to Richard Albright's power stood up and condemned him. His indefinite suspension was made permanent. They publicly apologized to Mrs. Gable and voted unanimously not only to reinstate her, but to offer her the position of head of the English department, effective immediately. And then the new acting chairman announced the creation of a new, fully endowed scholarship for promising young writers in perpetuity. It was to be called the Sarah Jenkins Award for Literary Excellence. The room erupted in applause. My mom was openly weeping, holding my hand so tightly I thought my bones would fuse. I looked at Mrs. Gable, who was beaming, a triumphant, brilliant smile on her face. I looked at Mark, who gave me a huge, proud grin from across the aisle. We had done it. We had faced down the monster and won. Later, as we were leaving, I saw a single, solitary figure standing in the shadows at the back of the auditorium. It was Jessica. Her face was pale and stripped of all its arrogance. She looked small and lost, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or hatred. I just felt a wave of profound pity. She had had every advantage, every privilege, and she had used it all to try and destroy someone else, and in the end, she had only destroyed herself. Our eyes met for a brief second across the crowded room. I gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, not of forgiveness, but of finality. Then I turned my back on her and walked away, toward my mother, my friends, and my future. My story was just beginning, and this time I was going to be the one to write it.